have monitored 3 years, which were central to passing the law of homeschooling in the Czech parliament. So we got all the debates, which were public. They are available, I think, all over the world, where you have democracy, that in the government you have a speech of various members of parliament, what they actually think about homeschooling, before they are going to vote on any kind of law. So all the debates that were related to homeschooling debate, we analyzed together with my students in the political statement analysis. And then, of course, as we have already said, I did quite a lot of literature analysis, especially from abroad, because in the Czech context there was very little written about this. So that is the data that went into my study. And now, how or what did I actually find out? So, if we have such a super duper school system in the Czech Republic, which is for free, why would you actually want to send a child or take a child out of the system and educate him or her at home, right? If you send a child to school, you have a free babysitter. And the free babysitter is super because you have, if you are clever enough, from 7 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the evening, free day. So you can do whatever you want when your child is in the institution. In Czech it works perfectly and 95% of the population does it. Not because they necessarily think about it, but because it's tradition, right? I will come to that. That one thing is to do it because it's usually done, and the second is that you really think it's good and you do it, that you think about it. So, nevertheless, we still have homeschoolers, but very often people ask, why would you do it? Because after the years that I've been moving among the homeschoolers, I basically believe that homeschool is really good for every child, but definitely not for every parent. And I would really put my hand into the fire for this statement, because I think that children really benefit from this, but only if the parent is something which I will reveal at the end of the lecture, the presentation, but that it's really not a thing for every or each parent, and it's not a shame, right? Now in the Czech Republic we have a pressure that if you are modern mother, you live bio life, you buy bio food, you go against compulsory vaccinations, and you are flirting with homeschooling, right? But you can acknowledge that this is not your cup of tea, that you don't want to do it. And I think it's perfectly fine. But at the same time, I know it's happening, we know it's happening, and we can see it around ourselves, and it's actually good to speak about this. Well, in my research, I found out that generally there are 5 groups of parents who choose homeschooling. First of all, these are the parents who work abroad or who have to travel for their work. So they have a job which they love, they want to do the job, but at the same time they happen to have a family, and it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. The family wants to be together and they want to move around. So they choose homeschooling because now the law allows it. The second group, it is a reverse. The talent is not on the side of the parents, but on the side of the children. So the children are special. They usually play some kind of sports and they need some special individual training, or they are good in music, or whatever art perhaps, a ballet, something where they need individual educational regime. Then there are parents who have physically or mentally different child. This is a very broad category. You can have a small ADHD, is it called in English, ADHD dysfunction, or you can have a child which is really with perhaps some kind of syndrome which is very difficult to integrate at school. But at the moment, the European Union in the Czech Republic is pressing upon each school to be so-called inclusive. That means that they must make space for including these children. Sometimes it works, but usually this is still on the level of idea, and the Czech schooling system is not prepared for this at all. So very often parents try it, and then they end up seeing that it's really harming the child more, and harming the collective of other children, and harming the teacher, that they decide to take the child out and have him or her on an individual regime, individual basis. And there is the fourth group, people who believe in different lifestyle or different ideas or ideology. Again, very broad category, anything from different religion to, I have researched a family who was against time. So in their home, they didn't have clock and watch, and they were just running according to the biorhythm. They were living in the countryside and really living a very different philosophy, and the children didn't know the watch and the clock. They didn't have it. The parents were cheating a little bit. They allowed themselves internet for 2 hours every night because they needed to get money, and they were doing some kind of training, and they needed to communicate, but the children didn't know it. And so it was kind of a hidden world. But the household itself, they didn't orientate themselves around the clock. They were self-sufficient. They had a small farm, so they were growing their own food. So you have really people of extreme, and these are usually the ones which you see in the media, right? Mm-hmm. They are the wow, the difference, wow, blinking light. But on the other hand, you have a family like me, completely normal, living in a large city, both parents working, the children going to normal after-school activities, and I would not consider myself weird. I would not consider myself different. I just wanted to try it because for me it was a better organization of family life than having to run with my son to school every day, right? So, but I would count myself into the third category, fourth category that you see there. The last one, it's usually true for kindergarten because it's convenient. Sometimes it's easier to keep the child at home because whatever you want, you don't want to get up early in the morning, you just want to be there with the child, or you have some other children, or you have some other organizations that are taking care of this. And in Czech situation we encountered this only in the kindergarten and mostly done by the Roma gypsies. So it is a very specific ethnic category, and they do it because for kindergarten you don't need any kind of educator's degree. Anybody, a parent can actually decide for kindergarten to keep the child at home, but, and that is a difference when I will speak about the law, in the kindergarten the school has the ability to decide from day to day to stop the program, and there is no way back. So if you decide as a director of the kindergarten that the homeschooling of the child is going badly, you can say to the parents the next day they must send the child to school, and you can never ever ask for homeschooling again. So it's very tough, but this is done precisely because of this misuse of this idea of law by the Roma gypsies. So then this is how it's done. So these are the 5 categories which I think you will mainly...
What do you consider kindergarten is from age 5, as you mentioned?
Yes, it's only 1 year.
1 year?
1 year.
And you consider...
Yes. So, well, of course, in the kindergarten you can be from the age of 2 until 6. But from the age of 5 to 6 it's compulsory. So, but if you want homeschooling in the kindergarten, you can do it for this one particular preschool year, they call it, right? So that is compulsory, but it's since 2017. Until then it was not compulsory. When my children were in kindergarten, it was free will, it was not compulsory. So it's quite a new thing. So, the first 2 categories, there are differences between the categories of the parents. The first one, the first 2, if their parents are working abroad and if they have a talented child, they usually do not question the current educational system. They are happy about the system. They know that the system is doing the best. And they are searching for such schools which are doing online teaching, because they believe that the responsibility for the parent is to provide education. The child must learn. So they search for such schools which are setting clear curriculum, which are setting homework online. And in Czech Republic we have 4 or 5 of these schools which they cater for this kind of homeschooler families. And they have YouTube education, they have YouTube classes. And if you are homeschooling parents who want such kind of education, you enroll into such a school. So that is a special group which doesn't really question the system. To contrast this, the other 2 groups, people who have children with different, either handicap or any kind of difference, or they are living different lifestyles, they are the challengers of the school system, because they are searching for something completely different. They are searching for schools with a different philosophy. They are searching for schools which perhaps have portfolio examination. That means that you don't get marks. You may have word reports, that you are not sitting tests and writing tests, but you are showing your posters and your books and booklets, whatever you have been doing throughout the year. So examination, it takes perhaps the whole day when the teacher speaks to the child and the child explains what he or she has been doing in the half a year that they haven't seen each other. And they are really choosing schools which are seeing what we call now formative education and a formative action, that they are assessing movement of the child according to his or her own speed, not to the national curriculum limits, right? So that's why it's very well chosen by perhaps the families where the children have some disabilities, because they would never ever pass in the system which every year wants the same from each child. And they don't really look if the child is done 1 mile step ahead or a minor step. But these kinds of schools which these homeschoolers are choosing, they are doing their assessment in a very, very different mode, different style. So, and I left out the kindergarten group because it's so specific and it doesn't really apply to the general school system, and I will speak about it later on when there will come time. So, the homeschoolers from this last two groups that I have just mentioned, they share something that we called in our research different ethno-theory, and they also have a different cosmology of education. These are special terms that we have borrowed from anthropology of religion, ethno-theory and cosmology, but what it basically means is that they view education differently. They don't like work or care dilemma. They don't like to choose either I have a career or I have a child. They challenge this dilemma. Usually this means that they revise their values, and I already started speaking here about the German families who are moving from Germany central to the borders of the Czech and Germany countryside, because then they can send the children to Czech schools and for some years basically do home education in this way, because in Germany it's not possible. But very often I have encountered in this group parents who have studied different things to what they have been actually making their money on later on when they were living. So very often, especially the women changing professions, when they started off as lawyers or perhaps economists, accountants, they would choose something that they can do from home or that they can do part-time and that they can do with children. So I don't know, one example, a lady that had retrained to become professional massage, giving massage. Some kind of usually services, entering into services. You cannot be an employee because you cannot work 8 hours, and you try to adjust your profession in such a way that you can earn some money and also perhaps get out of the house to get your head cleared. So it is some hygiene that you also need to do. It's not just for the money, it's for your hygiene, mental hygiene as well. So to get out of the house for some time, but also be with the children most of the time. In Czech Republic, and I think all over the world, it's 80% mothers who do homeschooling. The 20% is the mixture between the father and the mother. But it's usually the woman who is the initiator and the woman who carries it out. So it's a female thing.
I ask, but what do you consider when you say doing homeschooling? So you consider all learning which is ongoing in the home, or only this official building? What is doing homeschooling?
Doing homeschooling?
Yeah, it's only this part which is usually covered by school, or you consider homeschooling when also father comes later in the evening and they repair a car. Yeah, it's also homeschooling.
Okay, right. This is going back to this difference.